This video is going to go through the forms related to the interventions and activities of your coalition. So this is going to be where you spend the most of your time putting in your data. The prevention strategies intervention page is where you're going to enter your evidence-based programs, policies, and practices chosen by your coalition to address underage drinking. These are those broad prevention strategies and interventions that are listed in the evidence-based prevention strategy toolkit. For your reference, I do have that linked here. If you click it, this link, it will open up another tab with a PDF of the evidence-based strategies toolkit, so you can reference it there. As you can see, we have a little bit of a different format in this table, and that's because the interventions that you enter in are going to be ordered by the broad strategy that they come under, and you're going to pick that strategy whenever you enter in your intervention. I mentioned before in the planning meetings form, that it pulls from this intervention page to connect the interventions that the meeting related to. There are a lot of forms in the Data Hub that will do the same thing. They're going to pull from whatever interventions you enter into this page to connect the information that you're entering in that specific form with the applicable intervention. So it's really important that you keep this page updated and that you make sure you make this one a priority whenever you start entering information in for the first time into your Data Hub to make sure that you can enter the rest of those forms correctly. So let's go ahead and look at the sobriety checkpoints interventions that I had entered here. We're going to go to the edit record because I want you to see what it looks like when you're actually entering it into a form. So first, it's going to ask you to choose the broad strategy of your intervention, and you'll have these strategies to choose from. I have a link here, SPF PFS2 strategy descriptions. If you click on this, it's going to open a Word document that gives descriptions and guidance as far as which strategy to choose. The youth focus programs are going to be programs like life skills, positive action, your sudden impact, SAD club. They are programs and activities that are focused on youth. They're usually structured. They don't include interventions whose activities are solely related to information dissemination. For example, if you're giving out t-shirts or goodies at Red Ribbon Week, if you're handing out flyers for prom, those wouldn't go under Youth Focus program. They would go under your education media marketing campaign. We ask that even if you're doing multiple different types of information dissemination, if you're disseminating information about different topics, you still only enter one intervention under education media marketing campaign. That's because at a lot of events, you're probably going to be disseminating all of those multiple types of education. It's going to be signage or flyers or different topics. We'd like you to all enter all that into one under one intervention. So you'll just enter one of these. That includes your billboards, radio, if you have having town hall meetings, your information tables and health fair booths, brochure dissemination, all of those things. You have the option of community programs addressing retail availability. An example of that is compliance checks. A community program addressing enforcement of laws. Here are some examples here: party patrols, responsible beverage service training, sobriety checkpoints. Your organizational policy strategy are policies that aren't necessarily going to be laws, but they're changes in policy for like workplaces or schools that are still going to affect change regarding underage drinking or alcohol misuse. And then, of course, your policy changes are going to be your local, parish, or state law changes. Any interventions that fall under coalition or partnership building is just going to go under that umbrella strategy. And you'll click the backspace button to come back to your form page. Since this is sobriety checkpoints, we're going to choose our community program assessing enforcement of laws. You're going to put in your name of intervention, description of intervention. I was very brief and concise here, but you can be as detailed as you want. There isn't really a word limit here. We want to know the start date of your implementation. This is the first day that you are actually implementing the program, not whenever you decide to do the program. We have an end date of implementation. Not every intervention will have this. That's why it's not required to have that little red star. But if it does have an end date, we'd like you to put it there. We'd also like you to choose the relevant social ecological domain to this intervention. And as you can see, I can choose more than one if they apply. You should be pretty familiar with these. But just in case, I put a bunch of examples in parentheses next to each one, so it'll help you choose which ones are applicable. We want to know the target population, if it's community-wide, if it's just for a certain grade level or for youth, things like that. You can detail that there. Next, we want you to put the risk factors that are related to this intervention. This should all be reminding you of your logic model. Pretty much a lot of the steps in your logic model you're putting right here just in a web-based form. So what you put in your logic model as far as like what risk factors related to this intervention is what you're going to put here. Next, we want to know what were your considerations when choosing this intervention. You can choose any of these that apply, just however way that you came to know about the intervention or that your coalition decided to adopt the intervention. And last thing we want to know is this an evidence-based program, an evidence-informed program, or neither? An evidence-based program is a program that has defined curriculum or set of services that when implemented with fidelity as a whole has been validated by some form of scientific evidence. In this case, sobriety checkpoints are actually evidence-based as long as they are frequent, they're highly visible, and they're highly advertised. If it's a program that doesn't necessarily have that robust research behind each step, but that it brings in a lot of components that are research-based or evidence-based, and you are adapting it to your context, that would be a program that's evidence-informed. And of course, some of your programs might be neither. A lot of media campaigns might be neither evidence-based or informed simply because we just don't have that research available. Okay, and we will click Submit to save any of our changes. Next, we want to add activities related to our sobriety checkpoint. So we're going to go to activities related to interventions. Activities are the planned processes, events, and actions to bring about your program implementation. So all of your day-to-day, the actual doing of your interventions is going to fall under this form. So we're going to add an activity. See, our parish is already filled in. We're going to say Labor Day checkpoint. And we'll make it Labor Day because it's Labor Day. And it ended on Labor Day. So actually I'm just going to type it in. Won't let you type it in. Okay. And now we're going to select the intervention related to this activity. Remember, this is one of those connected fields that I was talking about. When I click in here, it's going to only show the interventions that I had entered on the intervention page. And I'm going to go ahead and choose sobriety checkpoints. Now here is where we put our outputs. Again, this should all be reminding you of your logic model. the number of outputs is usually going to be 1, but in some cases it might be more. So we did give you the option to put more. In this case, my only 1 output, I'll say 56 vehicles checked at checkpoint. I'm not saying that that has to be an output for sobriety checkpoint. I don't actually know what the output usually is for that, but this is just for demonstration purposes. Okay, but let's say there was more than 1 output for an activity. I'm going to choose 2 will give me another output field to put in, and you can choose up to 5. There's no reason that there should be more than 5 usually outputs for 1 activity. It'll usually be 1 or 2 at the most. If you find that you do have more outputs you need to put in for an activity, you can get in touch with me and we can talk about whether there's something you need to fill the form in differently, or I can help alter the form so that it fits your need. Okay, so that's all the information I need to put in. You see, it's really quick. Put in the name of the activity, the date, which intervention, I put in my output, submit, and done. That is the only information that we need for your activities. Let's say we did a life skills class. So for your curriculum-based programs, you're going to put an activity for an entire module. So if you're doing it's a 6-week curriculum, I believe. So we'll say the 6-week curriculum with, we'll say, Louisiana middle school 7th graders. And we did it in a 6-week period from March 16th through April 20th. We're going to choose our intervention. My only output is I'm going to say that there were 35 6th graders that participated. You can put the output however you want. A little bit more detail is good, but it doesn't need to be very detailed. And then that's it. We don't really need to know any more demographics or things that you're usually otherwise having to report. All right. So the next intervention information that you're going to be entering in are your fidelity assessments of your interventions. Fidelity examines the extent to which your implementation of an intervention is adhering to the protocol or the program model as it was originally developed. We are going to ask that it's reported on twice a year, in January and July, that you go through the interventions that you have in the Data Hub and you fill out a form for each one and just say where you are in your fidelity, as far as the fidelity to the intervention, but also the fidelity to your plan that you had made with the coalition. Whenever you fill out one of these forms, you are reporting the status of that information at that moment in time. So let me show you what I mean. We're going to add a fidelity monitoring assessment. Let's go back to our sobriety checkpoint. Let's say we had decided that we want to do sobriety checkpoints Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. So we're going to do, that was our plan for our sobriety checkpoints. But let's say the Memorial Day checkpoint went off without a hitch, but we just didn't have staff for the 4th of July, and we're planning is going well for our Labor Day. It looks like Labor Day is going to be on. So first it's going to ask us the stage of the intervention. We're going to say it's partially implemented. It hasn't all been done, and not all the pieces have come together. We're not going to worry about this first one, the fidelity rating for curriculum-based programs, because sobriety checkpoints aren't a curriculum-based program. If it was a life skills program that we were doing our fidelity assessment on, that's what we would fill in here. And we would check whether no program components were implemented, only some were implemented, most but not all are implemented, or it was completely implemented. And the program components are what we talked about in our learning day last year, where we talked about the who's teaching the class, the time that you spent on the curriculum, that you went in order that the curriculum calls for, that you use the format that the curriculum calls for, things like that. Those are the program components. For the sobriety checkpoint, since it's a non-curriculum based program, we're going to do this second one. And it asks us, where planned activities related to the intervention have not occurred, planned activities have occurred but are behind planned timeline, planned activities are occurring according to the timeline, or they are completed. And we're going to say that we're behind. We had wanted to do 3 checkpoints in 6 months, but looks like we're only going to get 2 done. And then we have a box to go ahead and note your challenges. So we're going to say 2 of 3 planned checkpoints will be completed. No staff available for July 4. You can, again, this is something you can be, detail is good, but it doesn't have to be an essay. And you'll have a place here, as usual, for notes and comments if you want to give any other additional information. We'll click submit. All right. So again, you'll complete one of these for each of your interventions every 6 months, and you'll see that at the table. It makes it easy for you to organize, to see which ones you've done, because it's going to list them by your intervention. Okay. Next, we're going to go to the last form in your intervention information. And this isn't necessarily directly related to interventions, but it is part of the SPF, important part of the SPF PFS grant on documenting cultural competence and sustainability. You might only enter this once a year or so, as you are documenting what actions you're taking or your action plans. We do have to report actions made toward cultural competence and sustainability to SAMHSA, and most of you are pretty familiar with the class standards and language related to this. This just gives you a simple form to be able to document those things. So if we say that we had an action related to sustainability, you can choose from whether it was implemented, evaluation, continuation of quality improvement, built or strengthened organizational capacity, expanded partnerships, secure new funding streams, or diversified sources of funding, or you can click in other, and you can type that in. If you choose if this is a cultural competence step you want to put in, it's going to ask you, you'll see another drop down here that's going to ask you to select the applicable class standards and their corresponding action steps. You see that there's a button of the question mark here will let you know the field for the corresponding action steps will appear after you select a standard from this menu. So we're going to pick our standard first. We're going to choose the governance, leadership, and workforce. And the steps for those are going to appear to your right. So we're going to say that it was recruit, promote, and support a culturally, linguistically diverse leadership. We can describe your action here, give a little bit more detail, and what was the outcome related to this action. And you'll see you can choose more than one. So if it's communication and language assistance, another box will appear to show the class action steps related to that standard. If you choose engagement, continuous improvement, and accountability, then that one will appear and show you the action steps related to that standard. If you choose principal standard, only one action step is going to show up because that's the only action step for that standard. And I'm going to, since I'm not putting in any text for, well, I'll just put in diversity. I'm putting in text so it'll let me submit. And this way, all of this is documented in one place, and it's just a way for OBH to be able to report these sorts of actions, and also for your, these actions aren't necessarily related to a certain intervention, but your coalition should certainly get credit for doing these things. This is a great place to be able to document those kinds of steps.